Hi everyone, I'm Dale Smith, aka Journo Dale, and we're here to talk about Canadian politics. Over this past weekend, Global News had a piece about question period attendance from prime ministers, and Mark Carney in particular, and how he doesn't show up for a lot of question periods. And they even had a handy little chart here, which shows that Carney's attendance is only 29% compared to Trudeau's at 46 and Harper's at 64 for their first year in power. And that rings true, and I figured we'd talk about that a little bit because, yes, Mark Carney does not show up very much for question period. The thing that is, I guess, a bit of a statistical anomaly in there is that for the first year, Harper would show up generally 3 times a week: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays. And then as the years went on, it was twice a week, and then by the end, it was Wednesdays. And that was pretty much it. Trudeau generally started 2 days a week, either Monday or Tuesday, and then Wednesday for the most part. But the difference, of course, was on Wednesdays he made it a point to answer every question, or at least respond to every question. He didn't necessarily provide a proper answer, but he certainly expanded what he was willing to answer in terms of QP. And wanted to create this kind of a quasi-British PMQs, Prime Minister's Questions system on Wednesdays so that, in his estimation, anyone could ask him a question. But what generally wound up happening was just we would have all of the leaders keep standing up and grandstanding through more than just the traditional leaders round at the beginning of QP. There's lots to be said about either way to do it, but it was certainly an opening for the leaders to get more clips for their socials and so on. And Carney has decided he's not doing that. He mostly shows up on Tuesdays instead of Wednesdays, which is unusual. We'll just do the leaders round, and that's it. Not even, sticking around to take a question from the NDP at the very end. But they are not. They no longer have official party status, so that's kind of on them for that regard. I will make a note there that, yes, the Tuesday versus Wednesday thing is somewhat interesting. Generally, it's always been Wednesdays because Wednesdays when they have their caucus meetings. Wednesday mornings, all of the parties have their big caucus meetings together. They will have breakout sessions with regions and so on. But that's the reason why Wednesdays tended to be the day that is the most boisterous in question period, because they've all been in caucus together. They've all kind of gotten ramped up or revved up and rah, that kind of stuff, and are much more, lively and engaged. And that's generally why the PM would also stick to Wednesdays as a matter of course, is also because you have the most attendance because everyone's there for caucus meeting, and therefore you have a much grander sense of theater in terms of who's there and who's able to, project the image that they're looking for on camera. Tuesdays, it generally tends to be cabinet meetings for Mark Carney, and so whatever the particular reason is that he's decided that that's the day he'd rather do it than Wednesdays, I find slightly interesting, but it's certainly one of the differences in tone and in the way he's running things than Trudeau did. One of the things I found just kind of not really interesting, but somewhat a bit false even in that Global piece, was you had a bunch of conservatives saying, well, it's important to show up for QP because that's where you hear about the issues of the country, which might have been true once upon a time, but nowadays the only thing we hear about is whatever the message of the day is from the opposition leader, which generally means 2, maybe 3 topics, and it's mostly just different MPs reading the same script over and over and over again, because again, they want to get those clips of their socials, and so they want to have themselves a clip of themselves asking the being tough, asking those questions, even when they are obviously reading and don't actually look that tough doing it. So, once upon a time, we used to have 15 or 20 different topics in a day during question period. It's no longer the case anymore. So I find the notion that you're getting much more utility out of being there to hear about the issues going on in the country doesn't really ring true anymore, at least not the way that QP is being practiced lately. But I mean, this all being said, I get every time I mention things in my socials like the PM is going to be there or not be there on a given day based on his itinerary, and I always get a response saying QP is a waste of time, he has better things to do. His job is to be in question period at least part of the time, because Parliament's job is to hold the Prime Minister and the government to account, and he needs to be there for that accountability exercise to happen. Now, yes, it's theatrical, and yes, we have a lot of problems these days with the way in which it's being conducted for clips, but what I think is also important to know is that if the Prime Minister wanted, he could make it a much more substantive exchange than it is currently. Most of the time, he will just, pat himself on the back for the programs the government's doing and leave it at that. No matter what the question is, or he'll occasionally offer a minor correction to an outrageous point that Polyev has made, for example, but he doesn't really go and give a proper, like he'll say, oh, it's time for Economics 101, and then he'll give something very banal, but it's not really answering the question about that's being asked, whether it's about inflation or food prices or gas prices or whatever. Yes, he will occasionally say things like the Canadian Climate Institute crunched the numbers on the industrial carbon price, and the impact on food prices is effectively zero. Okay, that's good. We need more of that. But at the same time, when you have Polyev and Andrew Scheer and everyone else saying things like food prices are so high because the government's inflationary deficits, well, no. Inflation, headline inflation, is within the Bank of Canada's target range. And B, the drivers of food price inflation are largely climate change, as well as supply chains and those kind of issues. Nothing at all to do with the state of the federal deficit. And it's absurd to think that. And you would think that Carney, as a former central banker, could actually stand up in QP on a daily basis and point out why that's not only wrong, but hilariously wrong, but he doesn't. And it's, I guess, one of these things that's somewhat frustrating for me, because there are a lot of answers to the questions that the Conservatives will ask, and the Liberals, Carney in particular, just doesn't actually provide them. And I don't understand why. And if we're talking about how QP has become meaningless and just a factory for sound clips, why not answer as though you were meaningfully engaging? Yes, the questions can be absolutely ridiculous, but if you're going to spend your 35 seconds, why not actually provide a fact-based breakdown of why the question is wrong and hilariously wrong, rather than just patting yourself on the back for the programs that you're implementing. It just doesn't make sense to me. And it's one of these issues with modern political communications that I don't necessarily understand or agree with. But here's where we are. All of this to say that No, Carney is not attending QP as much as his predecessors. No, he's not answering the same kind of number of questions as his predecessors did. And I do think it's something that's worth talking about, and it's a good thing that Global had given us some figures, and I think that's where the state of play is, and it's important to recognize these things. And that's everything for this week. Join us again next week for some more Canadian politics. I'm Dale Smith. It's at Journo_Dale on Twitter and JournoDale no_ on Bluesky. And don't forget to like the video, share, subscribe, and support us on Patreon. Thanks, everyone.